Sometimes, the best gardening advice doesn't come from a manual or an online tutorial. It comes from a dusty notebook tucked in your grandmother's kitchen drawer. Back then, gardeners didn't have fancy sprays or pricey tools. They relied on instincts, patience, and a few clever tricks passed down through generations. These old-fashioned methods might seem simple, even strange, but they worked, and they still do. Whether you're a seasoned grower or just getting your hands dirty, these time-tested gardening secrets deliver the kind of results you can see, taste, and truly be proud of. Let's uncover 21 timeless secrets your grandparents used for the best harvest. Number 1. Burying a rusty nail with your tomatoes. Let's start with a classic. It sounds odd, but gardeners have been doing this for generations. When planting tomato seedlings, some folks used to toss an old rusty nail or even a handful of them into the hole before covering it with soil. The reason? Iron. As the nail rusts, it releases tiny amounts of iron into the surrounding dirt. Tomatoes, being heavy feeders, love iron. It helps with chlorophyll production and leads to stronger, darker green leaves. Modern fertilizers may offer more precise nutrition, but this simple trick still boosts growth in poor soils. Just be sure the nail isn't coated or galvanized. Plain old iron is all you want. Some gardeners even swear the practice improves fruit production. At the very least, it's a clever way to reuse something otherwise headed for the trash. Number 2. Planting by the moon. It might sound like folklore, but for generations, gardeners planted with the moon. The idea is simple. The moon's phases influence moisture in the soil, just as they affect the tides. So, the waxing moon, when the moon is growing fuller, is considered the best time to plant crops that grow above ground, like lettuce, beans, and tomatoes. The waning moon, after the full moon, is said to be ideal for root crops like carrots, onions, and potatoes. Old almanacs were filled with these moon-based planting guides, and many gardeners swore by them. Whether or not you believe in lunar gardening, following the cycle encourages planning and mindfulness. It slows you down, reminds you to observe, and turns planting into a ceremony instead of a chore. Your grandparents may have never questioned it, and maybe that's what made their gardens so abundant. Number 3. Soaking seeds overnight. This one's deceptively simple. Before planting, older gardeners often soaked their seeds overnight in a bowl of lukewarm water. The goal? To jumpstart germination. The moisture softens the seed coat, letting water penetrate faster and encouraging quicker sprouting. Beans, peas, corn, and even squash benefit from this head start. You can also soak your seeds in a warm cup of chamomile tea before planting. Chamomile has natural antifungal properties that help protect delicate seedlings from damping off, a common and frustrating fungal disease that kills young plants before they ever get a chance to grow. It's a quiet kind of trick, not flashy or impressive looking, but it works. Soaking can shave days off germination time, especially in cooler soil. Some even add a splash of compost tea or liquid seaweed for an extra kick. It's especially helpful if you're planting older seeds, which are usually slower to sprout. Number 4. Composting. If you asked an old-time gardener what the most valuable thing in the garden was, they probably wouldn't say the plants. They'd say the soil. And nothing builds better soil than a good old-fashioned compost pile. Long before sustainability became a buzzword, people were turning kitchen scraps, yard trimmings, and garden leftovers into rich, dark compost. What many call black gold. Composting is the ultimate recycling trick. Banana peels, eggshells, wilted lettuce, and even newspaper can all break down into nutrients that feed your garden. There's no need for fancy bins or tumblers either. A simple corner of the yard with a shovel nearby is enough to get started. Over time, that pile becomes a powerhouse of fertility. It improves soil texture, holds moisture, and encourages worms and microbes that keep the garden ecosystem thriving. It's a slow process, sure, but there's real magic in watching waste turn into life. Old-school composting might be messy, but your garden will thank you for it. Number 5. Companion planting. Gardeners back in the day didn't have rows of synthetic sprays or fertilizers to lean on. What they had was observation, and over time they discovered that some plants just work better together. That's the heart of companion planting. It's the idea that certain crops, when grown side by side, help each other thrive. Some combinations repel pests, others boost soil nutrients, and a few even enhance flavor. One classic example is planting basil with tomatoes. Not only does the basil help deter unwanted insects, but many swear it makes the tomatoes taste better too. Then there's the trio known as the Three Sisters: corn, beans, and squash. Corn, the support, gives the beans something to climb. Beans, the feeder, add nitrogen to the soil, something corn and squash heavily rely on. And squash, the protector, shades the ground to suppress weeds and lock in moisture. Top tip: plant them in mounds spaced a few feet apart. Start with corn, then beans after the corn is 6 inches tall, and squash a week later. Companion planting takes some trial and error, but once you get the hang of it, it feels like unlocking a secret code your grandparents already knew. Number 6. String and stakes for straight planting. A crooked row doesn't hurt anyone. But if you ever watched your grandparents' garden, you probably saw them pull a string tight between 2 wooden stakes before dropping a single seed. Straight rows weren't just about neatness. They made everything easier: planting, weeding, watering, and especially harvesting. When rows are evenly spaced and aligned, you can move through your garden faster and spot problems before they spread. Older gardeners would reuse the same sticks year after year, carved, worn, and smooth from seasons of service. Some tied on twine, others used old clotheslines or even strips of rag. The point was to create a simple guide, like a ruler for the earth. It helped kids plant too, keeping eager little hands on track. Straight rows also made it easier to judge how much space was left for second or third plantings later in the season. Your grandparents didn't need measuring tapes or garden apps, they just lined things up by eye, and somehow it always came out right. Number 7. Rainwater harvesting. Back when hoses were a luxury and sprinkler systems didn't exist, gardeners made every drop of rain count. Rainwater harvesting is one of those forgotten habits that feels almost too simple, yet it's incredibly effective. Whether it was an old barrel under the eaves or a row of tin buckets lined up during a storm, your grandparents knew that rain was liquid gold for their plants, filled with beneficial microorganisms that enrich your soil, improve nutrient cycling, and can even strengthen plant immunity, a natural boost you won't get from chlorinated tap water. It offers pure and chemical-free hydration. You don't need a fancy setup either. A clean trash bin under a gutter downspout will do the trick, especially if you cover it with mesh to keep out debris. Some old-timers even stored rainwater in ceramic pots and used ladles to water by hand. It's a slower process, sure, but it puts you in rhythm with your garden. In dry spells, it's a lifesaver, and in wetter months, it saves you money. It's a quiet kind of wisdom that kept gardens alive through both droughts and downpours. Number 8. Bread dough slug traps. Before copper tape or slug pellets, gardeners turned to kitchen scraps, especially a bit of homemade bread dough, to lure in slimy invaders. The idea was simple: mix up a basic dough of flour, water, and maybe a sprinkle of sugar, then roll it into small balls or smear it onto a shallow dish. Bury that dish at soil level near vulnerable plants, and wait. Slugs, drawn to the yeasty scent, would flock to the dough overnight. In the morning, it was easy to scoop them out and dispose of them however you liked. Some folks fed them to chickens, others just dumped the dish far from the garden. It was a hands-on, mess-free method that didn't require any fancy ingredients. Best of all, it didn't involve chemicals that might harm pets, pollinators, or the soil. Gardeners knew that a slug's greatest weakness was its love of rotting carbs, and they used it to their advantage. Number 9. Mulching. There's something almost magical about what a good layer of mulch can do. Your grandparents might not have called it moisture retention, but they knew that covering the soil was just smart gardening. Mulching is the simple act of spreading a protective layer, usually made of straw, dried grass, shredded leaves, or even newspaper over your garden beds. And it does more than just tidy up the rows. Mulch locks in moisture so you water less, blocks sunlight from feeding weeds, and slowly breaks down to feed the soil. It's the kind of trick that saves time and improves your harvest. In the heat of summer, it keeps the ground cool. In colder seasons, it protects roots from frost. Some gardeners even mulch with compost, giving plants a snack while tucking them in. Mulch also protects fruits like strawberries or squash from direct contact with the soil, reducing rot and blemishes. Number 10. Crop rotation. Ask any old farmer how they kept their soil healthy, and they'll likely say the same thing. Never plant the same thing in the same place 2 years in a row. That's the heart of crop rotation. It might sound like something out of a textbook, but it's been practiced for centuries by gardeners who simply paid attention. Different plants use different nutrients, and planting the same crop in the same spot year after year saturates the soil and invites pests that thrive on predictability. By rotating your crops, you give the soil a chance to recover and keep unwanted bugs guessing. For example, follow heavy feeders like tomatoes or corn with legumes like beans or peas, which fix nitrogen into the soil. Leafy greens can come next, and root crops after that. The benefits show up not just in fewer pests and diseases, but in bigger, healthier yields. Even small garden plots benefit from this habit. Just switch up your container plants if space is tight. Number 11. Coffee grounds as fertilizer. Used coffee grounds are a surprisingly effective and eco-friendly addition to your garden soil. Rich in nitrogen, along with small amounts of phosphorus and potassium, coffee grounds can act as a mild fertilizer that supports leafy growth and boosts soil structure. When mixed into compost or lightly scattered around plants, they help improve drainage, aeration, and water retention. Contrary to popular belief, spent coffee grounds are only mildly acidic, making them safe for most plants, including tomatoes, roses, and blueberries. They also attract beneficial earthworms and may help deter common pests like slugs and snails. However, moderation is key. Too much can compact the soil or create imbalances. For best results, mix coffee grounds with other organic matter, like leaves or kitchen scraps. This old kitchen waste isn't just trash, it's a free, nutrient-packed boost your garden will thank you for. Just another trick your grandparents probably knew by heart. Number 12. Natural pest control. Before chemical sprays lined hardware store shelves, gardeners had to get creative to keep pests from taking over. And believe it or not, their natural methods still hold up today. Some of the best pest control came straight from the pantry, like sprinkling crushed eggshells around young plants to deter slugs, or mixing garlic and pepper into a homemade spray to chase off aphids. Chickens or ducks were sometimes allowed to roam the garden too, gobbling up beetles and grubs before they could do any real damage. It wasn't about getting rid of every bug, just keeping balance. Most older gardeners understood that a few pests were part of the ecosystem, but smart planting and natural remedies helped keep them in check. Even planting strong scented herbs like rosemary or mint helped mask the scent of more vulnerable crops. Number 13. Seasonal planting. Gardening with the seasons used to be second nature. Your grandma didn't have greenhouses or artificial grow lights to cheat the weather. She watched the sky, felt the soil, and learned to plant with nature, not against it. Seasonal planting means working with your climate's rhythms. Knowing when to sow cool weather crops like lettuce or spinach in early spring, and waiting for true warmth before setting out heat lovers like peppers and melons. It's about timing and observation. Old-timers often used cues from nature itself. When the lilacs bloomed, it was time to plant beans. When the soil no longer clung to your hand, it was warm enough for seeds. This kind of planting reduces stress on young plants and boosts yields because crops go into the ground at the exact moment they're ready to thrive. It also helps spread out your work. No need to plant everything at once. Number 14. Hand weeding. It might not look glamorous, but pulling weeds by hand has been a garden staple for as long as people have planted seeds. Before herbicides and fancy weed tools, it was just you, your hands, and maybe a good pair of gloves. That's still one of the most effective ways to keep a garden tidy. Hand weeding lets you get up close with your plants, noticing problems before they escalate. Old school gardeners knew the best time to weed was after a rain, when the soil was soft and forgiving. Some kept a bucket nearby to collect weeds for the compost pile. Yes, even weeds can serve a purpose. And while it takes time, it also brings a kind of peace. Number 16. Using garden journals. Before garden apps and photo logs, there were notebooks filled with scribbles only one person could understand. But those messy pages were pure gold. Garden journals weren't about perfection. They were about observation. Old gardeners wrote down everything. When the frost ended, when the tomatoes went in, how many zucchini came up, and which plants got hit by bugs. Over time, these records revealed patterns. They helped gardeners remember what worked and what didn't. They could track which varieties tasted best and when to expect that sneaky late frost. Some folks even taped seed packets inside or sketched out their garden layouts year by year. Keeping a journal reconnects you with your garden in a personal way. You start noticing the small stuff, which spot gets morning shade, or how the beans did better when planted near the trellis. And when you flip back through pages after a few seasons, you'll feel like you're reading your own gardening story unfold. Number 17. Creating windbreaks with corn or sunflowers. Long before plastic fencing or landscaping cloth, gardeners used living walls to protect their plants. And two of the best natural windbreaks came from corn and sunflowers. These tall, sturdy plants weren't just grown for their harvest. They were strategically planted at the garden's edge to shield more delicate crops from harsh winds. Corn, with its thick stalks and tight rows, created a natural barrier that blocked gusts, reduced soil erosion, and even offered some shade to plants that needed relief from scorching afternoon sun. Sunflowers did the same and added a splash of beauty while attracting pollinators at the same time. Old school gardeners often placed these windbreaks on the side of the garden facing prevailing winds, usually west or north depending on the region. Today's gardeners might overlook this simple method, but nature-built windbreaks are a quiet way to work with the elements instead of constantly fighting against them. Number 18. Using crushed charcoal to improve drainage. In old rural gardens, charcoal wasn't just for cooking. It often ended up in the soil, and not by accident. Crushed charcoal, also called biochar, has been used for centuries to improve soil structure and drainage. When mixed into garden beds, especially in heavy clay soils, it helps break up compaction and create air pockets so roots can breathe and water doesn't sit stagnant. But the real magic lies in how charcoal holds nutrients. Its porous structure traps minerals and beneficial microbes, slowly releasing them over time to feed plants without leaching away. Many gardeners of the past swept up charcoal from old fire pits, crushed it finely with a rock or hoe, and sprinkled it at the bottom of planting holes, especially for crops like tomatoes, peppers, or root veggies that hate soggy feet. Some even soaked it in compost tea first to charge it with nutrients. It's a quiet helper, doing its work underground. Today, biochar is sold in fancy bags at garden centers, but your grandparents made their own. It's a brilliant way to reuse a natural material and build healthier, fluffier, more productive soil with almost zero cost. Number 19. Roughening seeds before planting. Scarification. It might sound like something out of a science lab, but scarification is just a fancy name for a very old trick: scratching or nicking a seed's coat to help it sprout faster. Gardeners long ago figured out that some seeds have tough outer shells that make germination slow or unreliable. So they helped nature along. Using a bit of sandpaper, a nail file, or even the edge of a knife, they'd lightly rough the surface of seeds like morning glories or sweet peas. This lets moisture get inside faster and kickstarts the growth process. It's especially useful for older seeds or those with naturally hard coatings. Some even mimicked how nature does it, through freezing, soaking, or passing through an animal's gut. Scarification is simple, but it takes a little patience and care. You don't want to cut too deep, just enough to break the surface. And once you try it, you'll see the results. Quicker sprouting, stronger starts, and fewer gaps in your rows. Number 20. Growing trap crops to divert pests. Before pesticides were sprayed from bottles, gardeners had a more subtle approach to pest control. Sacrifice one plant to save the rest. That's the idea behind trap cropping. By planting a specific crop that's more attractive to pests than your main vegetables, you can draw the bad bugs away and give your harvest a better chance. For example, if cabbage worms are after your brassicas, try planting a patch of mustard nearby. They'll go for that first. Aphids? They love nasturtiums. Some old-school gardeners even surrounded their main garden with rows of sacrificial plants like radishes or marigolds, keeping the worst of the insect activity on the outer edges. Once the trap crop has served its purpose, it can be pulled and tossed on the compost pile. No need to let the damage spread. It's not about eliminating pests completely, but managing them naturally and on your terms. The trick is learning which plants draw which bugs, and it often came from years of observation and a willingness to experiment. Number 21. Using heirloom seeds. Long before online seed shops, folks relied on what they had, and that often meant saving seeds from the best plants in the garden. Heirloom seeds have been passed down through generations, often selected for how well they grow in certain climates or soils and how good they taste on the dinner plate. A brandywine tomato, for example, isn't just juicy and sweet. It carries the same rich flavor your great-grandparents might have enjoyed. What makes heirlooms special is that they're open-pollinated. That means you can save the seeds from this year's harvest, dry them, and plant them again next season without losing quality. And let's not forget the variety: purple carrots, striped tomatoes, and golden beans that you just won't find in a store. Which of these harvesting techniques do you swear by? Let us know in the comments below. Subscribe if you learned something new, and enjoy your day.